And welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur, talking gun control today. There's a loaded topic, pardon the pun. But, lots of strong opinions on this in Canada. Of course, our federal government has put some new restrictions in place, outlawing certain firearms as being, dangerous, I guess, in their eyes. We'll talk about that, what makes them dangerous and why are they being outlawed. And then, of course, we have a lot of registered firearms owners who are licensed and, ranchers, farmers, sports shooters who would see things, maybe in a different light here, saying, hey, hold on a second, where are our freedoms as Canadian citizens? We're not causing crime, right? So lots to talk about on this. And our guest today knows his stuff. Rod Giltaca. He's the CEO of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Their website is firearmrights.ca. And again, a lot of really helpful information if you check out their website. On wherever you are on either side of that debate, I think it would be helpful to actually get the information there. So, Rod, thanks so much for taking time for us here today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, lots to talk about for sure. I mean, of course, with the Canadian gun laws, there have been a number of changes over the last a number of years here. Most notably, I guess, recently, there's a freeze on getting any handguns. You can't buy one legally in Canada at this point. And then, of course, certain types of rifles are being outlawed. And why is that happening? So can you update us on the latest laws, I guess? Where are we at right now?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on, but if we were just to take a snapshot of how far we've come since the Liberals got their first majority government back in 2015, we had Bill C-71, and that brought back about 2/3 of the long gun registry. That was back in 2019. Then you had the May 1st, 2020 gun ban, the so-called assault style gun ban as a result of the spree shooting in Nova Scotia. Just by the way, a good little footnote there is the perpetrator. I was on the Mass Casualty Commission participant team for that inquiry. The mass shooter there had gotten all of his firearms from the United States, but we ended up banning about 500,000 firearms from Canadians. Then, of course, we had the handgun freeze a couple of years after that as a result of a shooting in the United States, Uvalde. And then, of course, we had Bill C-21, which passed a couple of years ago, which codified in legislation the handgun ban and a variety of other things. And then, of course, we don't want to forget the one failed amendment, which was G46, which was that long list of hunting rifles, actual hunting rifles and other firearms like that the Liberals had decided they were going to ban, but ended up walking that back. And now, of course, we're waiting for the national assault style firearm buyback, which was promised at the earliest convenience about 4.5 years ago. So
has it been 4.5 years already? Oh my! Now I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's something like $67 million spent. That is tax dollars. Okay, it's a lot of money, and not one gun has been bought back yet. And of course, every firearms retailer across the nation has been stuck with this inventory, paying interest on it. And, where do they go with that, right?
Yeah, for almost 5 years. And yes, you're correct. $67 million, not one firearm has been bought back. It's coming up half a decade. And it's been very damaging. Several businesses across Canada, not all of them, certainly, but several businesses have gone bankrupt. And that was a contributing factor. I'm certainly sure of that. But yeah, the Liberals have made a real mess of the gun file and the public safety file. And you wonder, you might be forgiven about wondering that they've gone completely in the wrong direction, but that's what the evidence shows.
Okay, and the buyback, that's supposed to be starting, they're promising anyway, that it's going to be starting very, very soon, I think in the east and then working to the west. And of course, they'll run into a few problems once they hit Saskatchewan and Alberta because, as I understand it, at least here in Alberta, the province pays the RCMP, but they're saying those funds are not going to be permitted to be used to actually round up any guns.
Yeah, well, everyone that has RCMP services pays the federal government. The federal government actually gives kickbacks so that it's cheaper to go with the RCMP than it is to have their own municipal or provincial police forces. But anyway, that's an interesting thing that most people don't know, but it's part of the story to some extent. But yes, the part of the buyback that is being launched is for retailers. And that part of the buyback is fairly simple. Why it's taken so long and cost $67 million so far, I don't know. It's the second phase that is the multi-billion dollar, somewhere between $2 and $7 billion if it were to roll out across the country. And that's buying those firearms back from private firearm owners. And that's borderline impossible. So that's where we are there.
Yeah, it becomes a challenge, I think. Well, here's what I've been noticing as well. Now, so the gun control lobby, they do want to see guns bought back, but they're actually complaining to the federal government as well, because they're seeing what's going to happen is, okay, so these guns that, assault rifles, assault weapons, are being bought back. So they're going to get a compensation check from the government. And with that, they can go to the gun store and buy almost an identical gun that probably looks nicer, but does the same thing. And so what's the difference and what's the point, I guess, right?
Well, it's important to point out that assault weapons, which are full autos, right, so select fire guns that would be used for a military purpose,
sorry, just to jump in there. So if I'm hearing you correctly, right, that's not the case here. So when we hear the term assault rifle, that's what I'm thinking, right? The average Canadian is going, some guy's got a machine gun and can walk in, to a school somewhere, or whatever, and shoot things up. But that's not what we're talking about, right?
Not at all. We're talking about semi-automatic long guns, and we have magazine size restrictions. Not that they enhance public safety, but we have them as well. So there's you can't have a magazine that contains more than 5 rounds in a centerfire semi-automatic rifle or shotgun. But yes, machine guns, as it were, have been banned in Canada since 1977. And these are just regular semi-autos. So it's really a political ploy than it is a public safety concern. And it's a difficult thing to grapple with.
I guess so. Did the government come up with a working definition of what an assault rifle is? Because I know I read some articles on this too. I mean, the assault rifle definition included apparently some collector's items that were like single shot rifles. There's certain types of bolt action, single shot rifles that were included in this as well. So what defines an assault weapon? Is it the way it looks? Is it the appearance? Is it something in its functionality that makes it, assault weapon worthy?
Well, it's certainly the appearance, right? Because that's what they use to market this assault style weapon ban. They scare people with modern looking firearms, and that's how they get some public support. I think it's important to go out of my way to say, we are the gun lobby in Canada, and we don't want there to be no rules, and we don't want public safety negatively impacted anyway, and we don't want firearms falling into the hands of the wrong people. But there's a logical way to move forward with something like this, and that does not contain calling regular semi-automatic rifles assault weapons. That it doesn't help to ban them based on appearance. Doesn't help to villainize people that would go out of their way to get a firearms license, which requires a daily background check for as long as they hold that license. Things like this, right? So I think gun control in Canada it's all about misdirection. Certainly about focusing on the United States and their problems, which we really don't have their problems. And it's a lot of a mess. And like I said a minute ago, it's really difficult to navigate a productive conversation about private firearm ownership in Canada and public safety. It's really difficult.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is we're not being honest about it, at least from the federal government point of view, banning these weapons. And there's no logical reason to, because there's other weapons that do the same thing, but they aren't banned. So what, what's the difference here? Again, it's how we're viewing this, I think. Now every party, you take the, center, left, right, whatever, they all have a position on gun control, and they take their position because they feel they have something to gain by it, I'm sure, politically. And there's probably altruistic reasons as well. They genuinely believe this will help, reduce violent crime, etc. So, okay, they have their beliefs. And but we should be able to back up those beliefs with some facts, I think, as well. So if you ask the average Canadian, what's your position on gun control? I think part of it would be that we really don't know a lot about guns, the average Canadian, and that's maybe why we don't make informed decisions on these things.
Well, this is the interesting thing. I mean, I think I'd come up with some type of analogy a while back. It was, several years ago. I said if I walked up to someone on the street and I said to them, "Hey, do you think we should loosen restrictions on handguns?" They would say, "Absolutely not. There's enough violence going on already." And then
Yeah.
the follow-up question would be, "Okay, can you tell me what the current restrictions are?" And they would be, "No." So if you don't even know what the current restrictions are, how is it even possible that you think that you need to tighten handgun restrictions? So of course the distinction is something like 95% of handguns used in criminal offenses in Canada come from outside the country. And then you have a component of that which are stolen guns. So the gun owners are the victims of the violent crime. Somehow you want to blame them for the violence. And then you have straw purchasing, which is a fraction of 1% of licensed gun owners have ever engaged in straw purchasing. So it literally almost never happens. So I think it's just really important that if you're going to have an opinion about gun control in Canada, that you ground that in knowledge. Like talk to gun owners, talk to the gun lobby, watch a few videos on YouTube, just do something so that you're not bamboozled by the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois.
Right. Okay. So we have very opposing views on this particular issue. And again, I don't want to make enemies where I don't need to, make enemies. I full disclosure, I'm a gun owner. I live in a rural area. So, they're pretty handy and I think necessary to have, where I live. But, so the folks who have a lobby with the government who want to see, really strict gun controls put in place and much stricter, prohibitions. I'm not. Well, I don't want to call them bad people. I think a lot of them have, seen, the damage that guns can do, and this violence is horrible. They want to see that stop. So their intentions are good. In that sense, we can agree. We want to see violent crime decrease and stop if at all possible. We just have different ideas of how to go about doing that, right? So what are they lobbying for specifically? How far do they want to go, I guess, with banning guns and so forth? And are those reasonable demands?
Well, that's actually a lot bigger question than some people might think. Number one, it starts with, anti-gun groups, they want more restrictions and they want a variety of guns banned. Based on my experience, they really don't want private citizens having access to any firearms. They think that only the government, meaning the military and police, should have firearms.
Right.
They deny it all the time because they don't want all of us standing up and opposing them together. So first they start with assault weapons, which of course have been banned since 1977, as I said. Then they move on to handguns. Then they move on to all semi-autos. And then they get a little bit too close to hunting, and then too many people stand up and they're like, well, not hunting guns. It's like, well, define what a hunting gun is.
Right.
So it's in my experience, 9 years leading the gun lobby in Canada. It's my experience. They really want everything, but they want to do it incrementally. And as far as why they want these things, they share all of the same concerns that somebody like me, I don't want Canada more dangerous. And I think if we approach the conversation in a reasonable manner, as Canadians, all Canadians, Canadians really have three concerns. Number one, they don't want criminals to have easy access to firearms, or legal access at least. Number two, they want to make sure that if someone becomes a danger to themselves or others, that they have some legal mechanism to remove those firearms. And three, they want people that have a license to buy unlimited firearms and ammunition. They want to make sure those people have some minimum level of competency, so some kind of safety training. And the licensing system in Canada provide all of those things, including daily background checks every 24 hours, spousal sign-off, actual people that have to, you need two people to be references. And all of these people and yourself are supposed to be interviewed in the vetting.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah. And well, just recently, and I'll give you an example. So common sense firearms regulation is a good thing. So, for example, during the vetting portion of the licensing process, we found out through an order paper question in Parliament from the Canadian Firearms Program that only 10% of the interviewees offered during the vetting process are even being called. So that means out of 10 people applying for a license, the firearms program during that licensing process will not call 9 of those people's references or the person that's applying.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah. So on one hand, they're saying, well, we'll spend $2 to $7 billion doing a buyback of 500,000 firearms, taking them away from people that haven't done anything to deserve it, and squandering that social capital too, right? That relationship between people and the government.
Yeah.
But we won't raise a finger to put $5 million a year or $10 million a year to actually truly implement the licensing and vetting system. So it's
my head is just
back door wide open.
My head is just spinning right now, Rod. I'm sorry. I'm going like, okay, so because I mean, this is probably, at least to me, it's one of the biggest issues. Is make sure these weapons, which can be deadly, right, in the wrong hands, don't end up in the hands of somebody who's, got some mental health issues, or a criminal background, or they've got, domestic, issues in their home where they're fighting each other all the time. And yeah, there's guns in the home. Really? No, I don't think that should be happening. And you're saying they're only checking out 10% of the people applying to make sure that doesn't happen. So like how big of a hole in the net is that? And I think anybody with their head screwed on straight is going to go, that's just dumb. And why would we not spend, again, a drop in the bucket compared to what we're spending on the whole buyback program on this?
Well, that's probably, in my opinion, that is the most important part of the vetting process, is when someone's spouse apparently signs off, you call the spouse and say, hey, do you have any concerns? Whatever, and the references, and call the person. So, it's things like this, Paul, that put people like me, and I'm getting older. Maybe I'm getting a little sour because it's been a long fight, right? But it's what creates the cynicism. It's what makes me cynical. It's like, well, you guys won't lift a finger to implement the system that you already have. You'll let everyone run in the back door and get firearms licenses if that's what happens. It doesn't happen very often, but the odd bad person does get them.
Yeah.
And you're completely unwilling to fix that when you know that it's a glaring issue. I myself have brought that to the attention of the Canadian Senate twice, which I've testified on Bill C-71 and 21, and the House committees twice, one on C-71 and one, and not ever a mention of fixing that or funding that. So yeah,
and I'm not seeing that. At least I'm not hearing much about this in the mainstream media either. I mean, this needs to be top of the list, I think. Hold on a second. If we truly are doing this to protect our people, then for goodness sakes, I think I'm not a lawyer, but I'm thinking, isn't there a pretty big opening there? I mean, if somebody does, have a spouse, kill their significant other here, and boy, you know what? Nobody ever actually bothered to find out. They didn't talk to the spouse. Are you okay with this? And now they're dead. I'm thinking there's a lawsuit there, and there should be.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen cases of that specifically. So, and again, in the big picture, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
If it happens once, it's a tragedy. Yeah. But that is something easy and relatively inexpensive, almost free, really, to implement. And that's why it's very hard for me to believe, as much as I want to assume goodness and altruism, it's very difficult for me to believe that anyone is in this social issue is really interested in improving public safety, because that would be an easy way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think we just have to look at this practically as well. What's working, what's not working, okay? So, is, I guess, like freezing handgun sales, for example, banning certain types of rifles. Okay, if you believe that's going to work, then we would see the results, right? We're going to see reduced violent crime, especially with use of guns, right? Is that what we're seeing? What do the stats say?
Well, we're not seeing that, are we? So we had Bill C-71, we had the May 2020 gun ban, we had the handgun freeze, we had Bill C-21, and we had a variety of other things happen all the way from 2015 to today. All this gun control that didn't exist and firearm related violence has gone through the roof. It's never been higher in certain years than in the history of stats can keeping numbers on firearm related violence. So back in 2014, it was the safest year since the beginning of record keeping, and we had none of these other laws. We had AR-15s, we had handguns, we had all that stuff. And now we've got more gun control than we've had since the early 90s, and firearm-related violence is through the roof. So we know that firearm-related violence is a result of root causes of violence. It's violence, just with firearms. So poverty, unemployment, lack of opportunity, social moral decline. These are the things that result in violent behavior. And then, of course, you can get unlimited guns from across the border. They're flying them over on drones, Paul. Like, how do you stop somebody from flying 11 handguns across the border with a drone that costs $1,000? So, we got to smarten up about this topic in general.
Yeah, far more beneficial, I think, to spend money trying to stop illegal smuggling of guns from the U.S. As you point out, the vast majority of them, these guns that we have and that are being used in violent crime, are not registered, guns that we've purchased legally here. It's the ones that are being smuggled illegally, right? Serial numbers erased, all these kinds of things. So let's put money into that. Makes a lot more sense. Where does the violence come from? Well, typically the drug trade is a big part of that, right? Gang violence and so forth. I guess when you look at the violence that does take place across our country, the vast majority of it, I don't think comes from, firearms. I think it's much more to do with weapons like knives or, a club or something. I don't know. What are the stats on that?
Well, knives used to be number one, and then I believe it was blunt instruments, and then it was guns. But I think handguns have surged to be the number one weapon, or at least it was last year or the year before it was.
Oh, okay.
But nonetheless, it's if you don't have violence, you don't have any of these things. And at the end of the day, it's really important. If the government really cared about public safety, they'd go after the handful of people that are causing all of this violence. Instead, they're letting those people go, making sure that they get bail every time, even if they're murdering police officers. Literally, they can make bail, and they were caught at the scene, for gosh sakes. You know what I mean? But then they turn and they want to take my guns away. So the government is destroying their relationship with me. They're dragging the police into it. I worked with police for 10 years, in training, and now my relationship with police is damaged. And they'll let public safety just continue to decline. So it's just, it couldn't be more, the direction they're heading in couldn't be worse. So that's something that people have to solve at the ballot box. They have to stop voting.
Yeah, a big part of this is, is there anything we could do about this, as the public? And there is. So we do need to be in conversation, I think, with our community leaders as well as our, I guess it's more of a federal issue, but still, the provinces get involved to this to some degree as well. So let's talk to our MLAs, our MPPs, and our members of parliament and our senators and so forth and so on. Big part of this. There's a lot of just regular folks. We've mentioned it already. Farmers, ranchers, sport shooters. There's families that go and shoot together. Now, these are not, these are like psychopaths. These are just, normal families. They go to the shooting range and they might shoot, skeet, that sort of thing, whatever, or shoot at targets, whatever it might be. They might go hunting together. People might say, well, that's dangerous, but it's actually statistically, I believe, a very safe sport, isn't it?
It is far safer than hockey. And there's a lot more people involved in shooting. If you just look at the number of PALs, right, possession and acquisition licenses, there's over 2.4 million Canadians that have a possession and acquisition license. And then when you're thinking, well, handguns must be a very niche thing, not very many people own handguns. Well, about 700,000 Canadians are licensed to own handguns.
Wow. And
you can contrast that from around 470,000 people that play organized hockey in Canada. So it's a big community. These are people that get a criminal record check every single day. It's a criminal offense to not store your gun properly. It's a criminal offense to not follow the rules in transportation. This is a highly regulated, just very careful responsible group of Canadians, and they don't deserve to be saddled with the Liberals and NDP's failures in public safety. That's for sure.
Yeah, again, we all want to see the same results, and that is less violent crime. But if it's not working, then why are we still doing the same thing? We've got to try something different here, right? So what would you say to people watching right now? What can we do? And where do you see this going over the next 10 years? Gun control, et cetera. I guess is it kind of like reverse psychology here? You know what? If we actually stop trying to ban guns and just trying to educate people and target those who are being violent, there's going to be a difference.
Well, I think it's important that Canadians have owned guns long before Confederation, before Canada was a country. Yeah. It is part of our national heritage. It really is, despite what some people that maybe have had no contact with firearms might think. It truly is. So you got to leave law-abiding citizens alone. It's probably important. Anyone that knows me personally would say, yeah, it's probably good that Rod has guns for a variety of different reasons. And it's really important part of our national fabric. So the way that you can change things or peel this back is don't vote for political parties that want to take your things, that want to blame their failures on you to cover up their corruption or their failures on public safety. Vote for political parties that are going to respect you as a citizen and trust you and give you the respect that you deserve for paying for this entire government. It's really important. Voting is very consequential.
Absolutely. All right. Well, there'll be some elections coming up relatively soon, I think. So thanks so much for taking the time to educate us here. Appreciate it, Rod.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Rod Giltaca, he is the CEO of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Again, firearmrights.ca. I do encourage you to check it out. It's very, very educational, okay? No matter what side of that debate you're on. Thanks for watching today. You can watch or listen to our podcast on WizeUp.ca or at Corco.com. And also always fire us an email if you have any suggestions for us, Paul at WizeUp.ca. God bless.